I am wildly inconsistent in how I choose topics for videos. Sometimes it's because it's something that interests me. Sometimes it's because a lot of people express an interest in a subject. And in this case, it's because it seemed, on the face of it at least, to be a boring subject. I received a message from a viewer asking if I would be interested in looking at Albany Park station, which turned 90 a couple of days ago. They did, however, say that it was a bit of an NPC station and there might not be much to say about it. Well, that sounds like a bit of a challenge, doesn't it? And so I thought I'd take a look and see if it really was an NPC station. By the way, for those of you who aren't as terminally online as I am, an NPC is a gaming term that means non-playable character, i.e., a character that doesn't do much, can't think for itself, is fairly insignificant. In this context, unimportant, nothing to it. That whole bit I did just then sounded like one of those old BBC News items from the 50s or the 60s, you know the ones I mean, where they're awkwardly introducing a subject that the presenter clearly has no idea about. All like, so what is a hamburger? Well, it's a kind of beef sandwich from America, and it's taking Britain by storm. This bit has sort of got away from me. Where was I? One thing I noticed was that Albany Park being 90 years old makes it a relatively new station. Relatively. I mean, there are lots of stations that are newer than that, but this one post-dates the other stations along the line. Now, why is that? Albany Park is on the Dartford Loop, which opened in 1866. The Dartford Loop is a curious line because, well, it wasn't necessary. It was built by the South Eastern Railway, who at the time already had a line to Dartford. Basically, this is another of those lines that exists, for better or for worse, as a result of the ridiculous competition between railway companies. The South Eastern Railway built the Dartford Loop not because they needed another line to Dartford, but because they were afraid of losing the advantage of their existing Dartford line. In short, the Dartford Loop was a shortcut along the South Eastern Main Line from New Cross to Dartford. It meant that they could run trains to places east of Dartford that little bit quicker. But it also gave them a route through Leigh, Eltham, Sidcup, Bexley and Crayford. Those places were not a super high priority for the South Eastern, but what they were afraid of was that the London, Chatham and Dover Railway would get there first. The London, Chatham and Dover had been founded as the East Kent Railway because people in East Kent felt that there was a pretty poor service into London at the time. That pretty poor service was provided by the South Eastern Railway. I don't think the backers intended to compete with the South Eastern, and in fact once they'd got their line in Kent built, they wanted to use the South Eastern to get into London. The sensible thing for the South Eastern to do, in my opinion, would have been to let the East Kent go to the expense of building the thing, then for the South Eastern to buy them out. But they didn't. The South Eastern decided that they wouldn't cooperate with the new company and figured that by doing that they'd kill the newcomer off. Well, long story short, they didn't. Instead, the East Kent decided to build their own line into London and become the London, Chatham and Dover Railway. And now the South Eastern had real problems because here was a company serving the same territory, carrying the same traffic, with the same goals. So not only did the South Eastern have to look after the lines they had to anticipate where the London, Chatham and Dover Railway might try to steal a march on them and get there first. So it wasn't so much that the South Eastern Railway wanted to serve Leigh, Eltham and the rest, but they'd be damned if they'd let the Dover boys get there first. And they couldn't risk the possibility, however remote, that the LCDR would find a quicker route to the southeast. Did I mention that the LCDR was also a really poor company? The South Eastern dealt with this whole thing so badly. So that is why the Dartford Loop exists. Now, I don't know what the opposite of gentrification is, but it would end up serving the loop quite well. Places in southeast London, like New Cross, were the charming suburbs of the city when the railway first arrived. But the city expanded, and those areas kind of went down market. Instead, the middle-class residents of southeast London moved out to rail-served towns further east, and so the Dartford Loop became very convenient. In 1899, the South Eastern and the London, Chatham and Dover reluctantly joined forces, having basically fought each other to a standstill. They technically existed as separate entities, but to all intents and purposes they were now the South Eastern and Chatham Railway. And, having put aside their differences, they were free to, well, not do much. Because by this stage they were both poor. While other companies in the south of England were electrifying their suburban lines, the South Eastern and Chatham could only make vague promises for the future. All this time the loop was pretty busy. As the quickest route to the southeast, there was a lot of traffic. As well as commuter trains, there was plenty of military traffic, express services, and, during the appropriate seasons, fruit trains and hop-picker specials. Hop-picking was a kind of cheap holiday of sorts for Londoners. They'd go to the fields of Kent over the summer and pick hops, and the railway laid on special trains for them. In 1923, the South Eastern and Chatham was merged with a bunch of other southern companies to form the Southern Railway, who drastically improved the service. They allocated some of the SECR's express engines to work the loop. Not top of the line, but a vast improvement over what had gone before. And more importantly, in 1926, they electrified the line. An improved service, in turn, encouraged developers to the area. They sold this dream of living out in the country and commuting via electric train. And finally, we get on to Albany Park. You see, for all this time there was no Albany Park station. For that matter, there was no Albany Park. The entire suburb was constructed on farmland by New Ideal Homesteads, who advertised it as affordable housing for those who were tired of the city. When you find a suburb that's called something Park or something Hills or something similarly bucolic, the chances are that you're looking at a totally artificial development. Like most of these projects, New Ideal Homes sold it as rural living, when, of course, by the time they'd finished building, it was anything but. The Albany Park estate, as it was known, would continue to expand until it was part of the general suburban sprawl. Obviously, a key part of this was the rail connection, and the developers wanted a station. The Southern Railway obliged, and gave us Albany Park Station, which opened on the 7th of July 1935. This architecture is pretty typical of the small suburban stations built by the Southern Railway. It's not fancy Art Deco like Surbiton or Richmond, but it's very much of the time. It suggests that they anticipated a decent amount of traffic, but not a huge amount. There was never a goods yard or sidings, which indicates that they built this with only commuters in mind. There was, however, a small signal box which lasted until 1970. By the Second World War, the line was badly overcrowded, as were most of the southeastern lines. More trains were not an option. The lines were at capacity. Two solutions were suggested. 1, longer trains, and 2, bigger trains. Well, in 1948 the latter was tried. The Dartford Loop briefly saw a service of Britain's only double-decker trains. These were not a success. Building double-deckers to fit Britain's loading gauge meant that the whole thing was very cramped and awkward, and bizarrely passengers decided that they'd prefer to stand on the lower deck rather than sit on the upper one. Anyway, they were quickly removed and transferred to other services. So they went for Plan B, run longer trains with 10 coaches. And for that the platforms would need to be lengthened. In 1955, Albany Park had this bit of surgery carried out, although British Railways, who took the Southern Railway over in 1948, didn't actually run 10-coach trains to Albany Park, so what was the point of that? In its 90 years, Albany Park hasn't seen many changes. The traffic it's provided has always been the same, all that's changed is the amount of it. The difficulty has always been further up the line. The approaches to London are ridiculously busy, so it's never been possible to increase the service to the amount it perhaps deserves. Still, it receives 4 trains an hour in each direction, which is pretty good by Zone 5 standards. Is it an NPC? Well, I don't know about that. It sees plenty of passengers. If it's an NPC, so is every station on the Dartford Loop, and the Dartford Loop has always been a significant player in London's commuter traffic. Happy, slightly belated 90th birthday to Albany Park. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. If you'd like to know more, my main source was R.W. Kidner's The Dartford Loop Line. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the extension to my platform. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.